Welcome back to your Passion, Purpose, and Personal Brand. I'm your host, Lisa McGuire, and today we have a returning guest whose work resonates deeply with what we talk about on this show. You may remember her, Leah Marone, from episode 166, Finding Balance in a Burned Out World. She is a psychotherapist, corporate mental wellness consultant, and keynote speaker who has a vibrant speaking schedule. I think she's got 7 speaking events this week, as a matter of fact. But she works also with hundreds of therapy clients and executives. And she is here today for something powerful. I'm so excited if you can't tell already. Her brand new book is called Serial Fixer: Break Free from the Habit of Solving Other People's Problems. And I'll be authentic here. I believe this is one of the most important books of our time because so many of us, especially high performers, high achievers, are trying to prove our worth through people pleasing and problem solving. I don't know about you, but I know a few people like that. And so I even believe so strongly in this that I wrote an endorsement for this book because I see firsthand how that cycle is quietly unraveling people behind these very polished exteriors that we have. So Leah, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here again.
All right. Well, we are back for a second round, and now we get to talk about this book. I know there were some threads of it in our last conversation, but now it is coming out, I think, next week. Is that correct?
Correct. November 11th.
All right. Very good. And we're going to start exactly with what is a serial fixer and how do we know if we are one?
Yes, that's the magical question right there,
Yes.
isn't it? So serial fixing, I mean, a lot of is caked into that phrase where I think many of us think, ooh, serial fixing. And that's just it. We approach conversations, interactions, exchanges with this rapid push to fix and solve and soothe and accommodate. And it comes from a good place generally, Lisa, where, people generally with high levels of emotional intelligence that can read a room, that want to protect others, that want to not be kind of the culprit or the target for creating or igniting anything uncomfortable. We overdo, we over accommodate, we jump in to fix and solve. And I've seen with that this leads to taking false ownership. And what I mean by that is almost taking stock in everyone else's hurdles and struggles and problems, but not allowing them the repetition and keeping ownership of how they get through them. And that right there is like the recipe to build resilience. And so you'll see so many highly empathetic and passionate people kind of know and can piece together very quickly what the issue is, what they should do about it, and they immediately start fixing and solving. And it creates these micro codependencies. It creates these imbalances in our relationships. And it's very confusing because the more that we're serving and helping and fixing and solving, again, wonderful. It's very strength-based. It's a gift. But you can see where if that is happening consistently, it leads this person who's constantly putting themselves out there and going above and beyond and working hard in all these conversations and for everyone else, somewhat isolated, somewhat lonely, somewhat confused, somewhat resentful. And I think that's right there is one of the things when we think about cyclical exhaustion and burnout and, imbalanced relationships, that right there is one of the culprits, is how we show up in the roles that we occupy.
And I'm thinking on the other end of that, imagine there is a leader who takes on this role of serial fixer. I'm going to help my team fix it. Like I'm going to be the person they're going to love to work for. When in fact, think about if you're coming in and fixing things for all of your team members, what is that doing to them?
Yes, you nailed it. Because just like anything, we need repetitions to build physical muscles, and mental and emotional muscles, and to gain that self-trust, right? And when someone kind of swoops in and says, I'll handle that. Let me take care of that. Do it this way. This is what you need to do, to kind of soothe themselves in reality, like confirming that I am a good leader. See, because I'm always available and I'm the go-to person for everyone and I get stuff done, but I'm also exhausted and I'm up at 2 a.m. and I can't balance any other role that I would love to, access and be part of in my life. And so I think that right there is one of the biggest culprit, is almost taking away the opportunities for people to get those repetitions in. And leaders, we all know this, but it really pins to like, great leaders are the ones that empower. Great leaders are the ones that support and don't solve. And that right there allows for teams and individuals to grow, to again gain self-trust in themselves, gain confidence. And that's where you're going to have people that soar and teams that unite and get stuff done.
Yeah, I can see just the ability to inspire people, but also that empowerment of saying, yes, I believe you can do it. And if you hit a bump, that's going to be something that's going to help you grow. It's not always easy for us to let people run into things, right? Like we know there's an answer, but there's something that we as humans have to go through that process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we do. So the book shines a light on how people pleasers often tie their value to their usefulness. And you just referenced it there. So why do you think so many high performers are caught in this loop of doing more to feel like they're enough, right? They're up at 2 a.m. writing the email. They feel like they have to do more. What's in that loop?
Yes. And really, the loop involves an internal conflict, right?
Mm.
Because we have different parts of us that are motivated by different things and are protecting us from different things. And so you think about, just with all the things that have been circulating over the years about burnout and boundaries of just say no. Just close your laptop at 6 p.m. Just don't do this. And when someone says these things, we nod and we filter it through a part of us that's like, that makes a lot of sense. I should really start doing that. But when it comes down to actually making that decision and activating that boundary, another part of us surfaces. And one that might be our inner critic or our inner pleaser that has a very strong association with what makes a good leader, what makes a good team member, what makes a good parent, what makes a good partner. And that's where the conflict arises. If I don't answer this email at 10 p.m., if I'm not available for my team, if I don't do X, Y, and Z, then what if I'm deemed as I'm not passionate? I'm not a hard worker. Mm-hmm. I'm not, a team player. And people are going to start to question my ability. And those are the things that those protective properties, those internal bodyguards, if you will, really throw these scenarios and what ifs and fear-based things our way that really gets in the way of executing a boundary. And so I think that's the biggest thing when you think about setting and maintaining healthy external boundaries. The work really begins with understanding kind of the flow and the internal conflicts that we all go through because we have very different parts of us that are motivated by very different things.
Yes. And as you talk about that, I just think how much of that is the ego coming in to make ourselves feel better, right?
Yes, yeah. It is. Right. It really confirms with those definitions of if I do this, if I push myself, if I'm continuing to be productive and filling every crack and crevice, I'm a good leader. Mm-hmm. I'm doing all that I can. Mm-hmm. I'm a good person. And when those things are challenged, that's when the alarm bells go off, the urgency happens, the anxious thoughts. We're out of the present moment and we're entertaining futuristic thoughts and ruminating about past thoughts with, unfortunately, a pretty negative filter.
Yeah, not a good place to be. But you do talk, you've got this term, Leah, that you use. It's called emotional hangovers. Like that phrase really stuck with me. What does that mean and why does that matter?
Yes, I know. Emotional hangovers. Think about a balloon in your belly, right? And, throughout the day, things happen, and very minor, perhaps in isolation, but things happen that let air out of our balloon. and then
Mhm.
fill up our balloon a little bit with air. And again, these could be very minor things in isolation. But when we're walking around with a full balloon, we pop. And our pops
Mhm.
can look very different depending on the day, depending on our personality type and what we've been modeled. But the whole concept of an emotional hangover is when we are going through something, we have a rigorous week, we have something that's pressing us, pushing us, and we're all in. And we know that we have to suppress certain fears, certain thoughts, certain anxieties to stay focused. This
Mhm.
is human. This is grit. This is resilience. We don't want to lose this. But what happens sometimes is since we haven't had the opportunity or maybe didn't make the time, and maybe on purpose, to kind of entertain some of these, thoughts, anxieties, these worries, all these things, we tend to get this tidal wave of emotion after the busy week, after the
Mhm.
busy quarter, after the difficult conversation. And that is normal. And it's not something, I think when people realize that, wow, I've had an intense week. I was extremely on edge. I executed. I'm really proud of myself. But now the weekend has come. I'm over the hump, but I'm finding it hard to get out of bed. I'm finding it hard to put two sentences together. I'm anxious and everything's over. What is wrong with me? And that's just a way that your body is saying, well, you didn't either have time or you weren't mindful. But it's okay to clear your own clutter, to let air out of your balloon. So
Mhm.
the body and the mind are kind of left to their own devices. You'll
Mhm.
see this happen on a daily basis sometimes. When you're exhausted, you push yourself to the max, you're going, going, going. You go through your whole day, and at the back of your mind, you're just like, I can't wait to go to bed tonight. I'm so tired. I'm going to hit the pillow and be out. And then you lay in bed and you're like, how am I still awake? How is my mind still going? Whether it's 2 a.m. or when you go to bed, and it's excruciatingly like, oh, it's frustrating. And that right there is the hangover effect. And your body and mind, again, are kind of giving you this nudge that, well, you're not actively or proactively clearing out your own clutter, letting air out of your balloon. So again, we're kind of left to our own devices, and all the bells and whistles and stimulation is gone because you're in bed. And here we go. We're going to try to give you a clean slate for tomorrow. And so those types of self-awareness things, and knowing that emotional hangovers are going to happen, but if they're happening perpetually, we got to listen. Our body and minds are on our team. And if not, that self-awareness, those internal conflicts, things that move us out of the present when we feel most alive and most aligned, that's going to get us.
Mhm. Yeah, they're saying we still got work to do and you're ready to check out. No, and I think particularly with where we are in the world right now, there's a lot of opportunity for these emotional hangovers. And that's why I love giving it a term or giving it a name to build the awareness of what is it that we're really doing, and the value of building time into pause, right? Just to do nothing and look at that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's all really good. All right, so now we're going to get into one of my favorite things is like trying to figure out where do I fit in the category. So I want to go to the types of serial fixers. You have named saints, doormats, and steamrollers. So give us a quick picture of each of those and maybe even share, did you struggle with one of those?
Oh gosh, I think I've struggled with all of them. The steamroller, meh, I have too much pleaser in me. But I think, the doormat is kind of historically what we categorize someone who is labeled as a doormat, where it's just, my needs, my wants, any type of thing that's going to be for me is just not. I have it in the back burner. I don't have
Mhm.
alignment with myself. I don't know how to internally kind of structure, pause, and align with what I need, what I want. So I'm just going to look to external things and other people's needs and wants and structures as my own. And so you can see where there's this internal conflict of whatever you need, I'm accommodating, I'm adjusting, I'm prematurely acting to preserve you, to move you away from any uncomfortable feelings, and I will endure. I will figure it out, or I will distract myself and create more and more of this distance between me, myself, and I.
Mhm.
And that's where we see, unfortunately, this spike in anxious thoughts. We see this spike, or actually, decrease in just mood, because that's when all of our bodyguards internally are yelling at us. Like,
Mhm.
what are we doing? You're not following any cues from anyone in here, and we're getting lost in the shuffle. And there's a huge disconnect. But it's that, I think, to your point, like there's a little bit of ego in this mix, and also this push of, if I don't do this for this person, if I don't, kind of keep continuing with saying, whatever you want, it doesn't matter. Of course I can do that. I'll rearrange my whole day that I've scheduled for 3 months to do what you would like. It challenges them internally with, if you don't do these things, people aren't going to like you.
Mm-hmm.
You might be seen as mean and selfish. And that right there is one of the biggest motivators that doormats have and want to avoid. And so you can see that they're all in with external validation instead of kind of balancing that and really at the forefront knowing that, like, how do I feel about myself?
Mm-hmm.
Can I do both? Can I meet myself in the middle? And that's where we find the doormat. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that doormat, Leah, I'm just thinking about, now I'm a little bit older than you, but I'm thinking about the generation when I was a child. That was the script I was given, to follow this role of putting my family first, putting my partner first, putting my children first. And I don't think I'm alone in this. I think that there tends to be a lot of women who believe this is the role they are to play, that they don't have a voice, that they are to be seen and not heard. And this is why I see so many people that, are afraid to show up, are afraid to voice their opinion, aren't really living into their potential. Do you see that from, your professional perspective as well? I know there's a lot of all types of people who are people pleasers, but do you notice that particularly with that segment?
I do. I do. And I do think you make a great point where a lot of it depends on what we were modeled and the
Mhm.
messages and the very strong associations we made when we were young, right? I'm a good person if
Yes.
people will like me if.
Mhm.
And those things tend to happen, developmentally very young. And sometimes it's very hard to kind of challenge that foundation. It's, I think, women in general, if we kind of isolate that and kind of go with the stereotype that external validation is seen as like a huge thing. That's a huge value. It's like, don't ruffle feathers, get the praise, be included, things will come, your options will come if you accommodate and, kind of play this very passive, kind, gentle role. There'll be room for you perhaps later. But you can see that the danger with that is that people are not getting their necessary repetitions in
Mhm.
to understand themselves, build that muscle of internal validation, and build that self-trust. And you can see them when then roles that they firmly and beautifully occupy, whether it's as a parent, whether it's as a partner, whether it is in the professional world, when those roles start to change and shift or are no longer taking up as much space, you can see where that leaves people in such disarray. They have this almost crisis of like, who am I? I'm actually not sure because I've totally been living through just these roles and not really checking in with how I'm actually feeling and thinking and embodying these roles and how it ignites me. And so I think that's one of the challenges just with females, but in general that but the cool thing is that you can meet yourself in the middle, not advocating that it's like, oh, we just live the self-centered, selfish life and to hell with everyone. Not at all. View these things and this emotional intelligence and such a thing, a pro that keeps us connected and values family and cohesion and teamwork. But I think that we have to remember, and this is why, I hope Serial Fixer, kind of paves the way for some of this, is that we have to put ourselves into the equation because you're not going to get away from you, right? You're always going to be in every chapter that you have. And so building that relationship with you and all of your parts, even the ones that you wish you could get rid of, is essential.
Yes. Yes. No, I think that's a really good part. Like, you're always going to be at the center of some story, of the story that you're living in. But I think the other thing too that really sticks with me is the fact that we do get to choose, and maybe we got the message that we didn't. So I love that in there. So all right, so that's a doormat. pretty clear. I've already seen myself in one of these. Tell us about the saint or the steamroller.
Yeah. So the saint is again kind of, has some similar qualities, I guess you could say, with the doormat. But the saint is interesting because again, very savvy, high EQ, really values connection and will do anything at all costs to keep those connections. And also this persona that they truly value this, which they do. But you see that this is the person that they over backwards. They're always trying to do thing. But this is someone behind the scenes that has those very anxious thoughts that might suffer from of resentment. They're trying so hard to insert themselves where needed. Still, this is a very leadership built role, but they suffer behind the scenes and they don't want anyone to know that they are. They don't want to burden anyone. They feel guilty if, kind of the spotlight in that way is on them. And so it's this undercover, we talk about masking. It's this kind of undercover internal struggle that's taking so much energy. And you talk about balloon pops. Saints will have them. And they try very hard to be strategic when that happens, to not burden anyone else and ignite their critic that's going to be like, what the heck's wrong with you? Why can't you keep this all together? You have a beautiful family. You have a beautiful this. What's wrong with you? Why are you not grateful for this? And so you can see kind of the turmoil internally that happens. And so, you'll see a lot of perfectionism. You'll see a lot of, anxious thoughts and kind of ruminating about the past. And this kind of doubt or just confusion around, I'm doing and trying to do everything right. Why do I feel lonely? Why do I feel like I'm not living? This doesn't make sense. I'm doing the formula. And so that's kind of the saint. And the steamroller is kind of on the opposite side, where there's a lot of inner critic happening. Mm-hmm. And the inner critic doesn't let up. It occupies a lot of real estate. And the inner critic may say things like, if you don't speak up in this meeting, if you don't interrupt, if you don't show your value and your authority and tell people kind of what to do and that you know what the hell you're talking about, you're going to be cast away. Nobody's going to take you seriously. You're never going to get ahead in this world. And so you see this with kind of this aggressive insertion. You see this with someone who kind of, sometimes can seem as a know-it-all, someone who immediately, struggles with effective listening skills. You give them a little bit of information and they're off to the races, comparing like how that relates to them or what they know, or giving you just already a kind of a laundry list of things you should do. And really, again, sometimes we look at these people and we're like, oh my gosh, they're a lot. Like, what's going on with this person? But when we look through the empathetic filter of they're showing you their protective properties, they are showing you that like they've been cast out before, or there's a deep-seated fear that they will be. And isolation is something they don't want to feel. And not being taken seriously is something they don't want to feel. And so there's this drive to fix. There's this drive to insert and serial fix and be the person that people come to. And when in reality, they might be turning them right off.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm thinking about a steamroller that I met at a networking event about a month ago, that when they presented themselves in the room, they had to go back and present themselves a second time because the first time they felt like they didn't do a good enough job. And their presentation the second time, they elevated themselves. So like I felt for this person, just the compassion of, oh, you were good the first time. You didn't have to prove yourself the second time. But no, we can definitely spot those steamrollers, whereas maybe the saints and the doormats, maybe not so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of that isolated, sometimes hidden, just the turmoil that, yes, they won't want to burden anyone with.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I know you do lots of leadership workshops for executives, a lot with educators, healthcare providers. What is a boundary you see that is the hardest for serial fixers to hold? And why do you think that is?
That is a wonderful question. Gosh. So the biggest boundary, I think when I normalize the whole chain of events that happens, kind of alluded to it earlier, when we're kind of in our logical brain and we're hearing some of these reframes, we're hearing like, just say no, take care of yourself. I think when I normalize that, we're kind of filtrating this information through one part of us, and it sounds wonderful. But then we have this other part of us that surfaces and challenges it and doesn't allow us to kind of follow through with this boundary. You'll see relief in people's faces. Like, I'm not alone in this. I'm not just highly unmotivated. There's nothing wrong with me. I just have some work to do in soothing these protective parts of me that come in way too strong and are trying to protect me from something. And I need to kind of, instead of shoving these parts of me down and questioning and engaging and fueling these false self narratives, it's like, how do I start to, with these bodyguards internally that I have, understand them, understand what they're trying to protect me from, understand what they're not trusting in me, and take these little micro risks to try to build that muscle and create some self-trust. And that's the biggest thing I see, where it's almost this clarity. I'll see it in therapy. People will leave and they'll be like, this is great. This sounds really good. And I'll sometimes, when I see that, I'll pause and say, okay, but what happens when this doesn't sound really good tonight at 9 p.m.? Or this doesn't sound really good tonight, after you have that hard conversation. And that's what we need to start talking about and normalizing, is that we filter information through different parts of us all the time. And that's normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I could see where this self-trust piece, Leah, like we might trust ourselves to help other people, but we don't trust ourselves to help ourselves, right? Like we put other people first. So that self-trust piece, and I love what you say about, just do it. Like, yeah, that sounds easy. but that mandate, it's not a check the box thing, is it?
No, it's certainly not. It's certainly not. And that's why, again, serial fixers love having something externally that they can focus on, that kind of fuels that sense of purpose, right? And rightfully so. But if that's all that's happening, and it's almost like, let me use everyone's hurdles and dilemmas and what they're going through as kind of my playbook, so that I don't have to look inside my playbook, because that seems daunting. I don't even know where to start. So I'm going to kind of distract myself and be this saint of a person, this person that everyone comes to, because that is going to overarch all the turmoil in here, because I'm a good person.
That's right. Yeah. Put that identity on, and not even look at that. I see that so much. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've felt that before. So, I've got a long background in education. And so I have seen parenting from multiple perspectives, not only as a parent myself, but seeing parents, soon to be parents, seeing new parents, seeing empty nester parents. And I think one of the most eye-opening sections of your book was about parenting as an extension of fixing. There was a term back when I was in that industry where that surfaced called helicopter parents. And then it turned into Apache helicopter parents, and then bulldozer parents, right? So this is all serial fixer habits that show up in families. Where is that coming from? And what does it take to shift that?
Yes, amazing question. I talked to a group of women just earlier this week who were excelling professionally and trying to also excel, at least how they defined it as a parent. And many of them said, I just don't have time. I really beat myself up and I don't have time to email the teacher again and do this when my kid is 15 and I know they can handle it, but I need to do it, because if I don't do it and I'm not kind of taking the leap and fixing these things, and I'm there for my kid in all the ways, my critic pops up and challenges and really eats at me and says, you're not really being a good enough mom. Mm-hmm. And so I think where I'm really seeing it is just this immediate, when there's any type of emotion, distress, discomfort within our children, within our teens, within our coworkers, we immediately will go into problem solving mode. Mm-hmm. Too premature. We're not meeting the person where they are. Mm-hmm. And what I love to show and kind of demonstrate with people is it's almost, think of yourself at a dead end. You're at a T in the road. And in one way, you can go into, okay, this is what you do. Let me take this off your plate. Okay, I'll have a conversation with them. You do this. You're going into that fixer solver role. Mm-hmm. The other side is, as much as you're like, oh, and this is so hard, you start with validation. You start with either paraphrasing, a nod, yeah, no, it sounds like you did have a rough day. You start there and let the person, whether they're 5, 15, 45, know that you are working hard to try to decode the message that they are saying verbally or non-verbally, and you're meeting them where they're at. It's almost like if people are running around with all these balls of yarn, and if you are constantly getting thrown everyone's ball of yarn to untangle, one ball of yarn, few ball of yarn, it's not that heavy, but where the heck is room for your own? And so thinking about you're not there to untangle everyone's ball of yarn and take this false ownership and do the majority of the processing skills involved in sifting through something that's hard. Your job is to start pulling at some of the threads where they can keep ownership, and they are the ones that establish the pace of how the yarn ball becomes untangled. And that's really hard for us parents because we kind of have this vision and this timeline of like, whoa, my kid's not doing this. Am I not being a good enough parent? Are they going to survive? Are they going to be able to be a functional adult? Like all these fears that we make about us come into play. And you can see that then pushes that stress, that anxiety, that, nagging, if you will, that, well, you got to do this. Let's do it now because we're looking to soothe ourself and silence our inner critic and confirm that we're a good parent.
Yes. And, when I was in the midst of that, one thing that we saw was the impact on the children. So we started noticing these children that graduated from high school who had been parented by well-meaning, I'm going to help fix this for you. When they got to college, after they left home, when they got to college, there was a rise in visits to the campus health and wellness, right? Because stress, handing on the physical parts of stress, emotional stress that they had. And so these children who always had somebody to do something and make it easy for them. We started seeing RAs in universities get a call, can you go wake my daughter up? She's got an 8 o'clock class. This has now transferred, Leah, into what I'm hearing in business, that some managers are getting calls from parents or even parents being asked to be part of interviews. Are you hearing this pervasiveness going through our marketplace, through our society?
I am. And it's serial fixing at its finest. And it's kind of moving in every chapter, right? And you can see where it just really highlights a lack of trust on a lot of levels, but also it's really coming to fruition that your child or even your adult child at this point, is lacking when it comes to repetitions and getting those reps in to build those muscles, to build that self-trust, to get through uncomfortable things, to show their internal protectors that we got this, we got this. And so it's always relying then on the parent, the caregiver, whoever it may be, to structure it. And that's kind of where we're seeing that deficit of that lack of ability and all the tools that it takes and the self-trust that it takes to structure and problem solve. And here's the good part is that it can happen. It's just a matter of understanding what's happening, how the internal drivers or motivators or protectors, how they're playing a role, and starting there. But a lot of parents that I'm working with too, it's about really understanding when you're doing this, what is this, when you're stepping ahead and accommodating and fixing, what is this serving in you? What is this confirming for you? And if you had this space available, what would you be doing with it? And would it ignite anxiety in another way because you're lacking that self-trust? And so it's so interesting how it all relates.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, how they would answer that question. Well, then I feel needed, right? Then I still have a role of value in that child's life or that person's life. And this book could not get here fast enough. I'm so excited for it. So you've got this framework called Support, Don't Solve, and it has been called life-changing. So could you walk us through how this works in practice, either for leaders, parents, for friends, or all of us?
Even the phrase, just thinking about support, don't solve. And really, if that yarn ball analogy resonated with you, think about that. It's not about, again, all or nothing, just kind of yeah, I'm just going to go to the beat of my own drum, screw everyone else. Like I'm just going to focus on me. That's not what we're advertising. We want to really, again, highlight the gifts of like having emotional intelligence, helping, supporting all these things. But thinking about that first step, and this is the first step in the support don't solve model, is that validation. We're not great at it. We're in urgent, we're constantly stimulated, we're at a very fast pace anyway. And so we jump in and prematurely relate. Oh yeah, that happened to me when I was this, or when I had an old manager that this. So we prematurely relate, we shift the energy and we begin to kind of fix, or we immediately say, let me handle that, or you should do this. And again, some people that are external processors that need you to be a space creator in that moment are like, oh, well, I can just bring this to Lisa and she's actually going to structure it and untangle it. So you know what? I'm going to try to do this pretty much every week when I have this kind of question. And you'll see this with managers. I challenged one leaders this week. He said, yeah, I've been doing the open door policy for decades. And I'm like, how's that working for you? And he kind of laughed and he stepped back and then his face kind of froze and he goes, it's actually not at all. I'm stressed out. People are constantly interrupting me and I feel needed and I feel a sense of purpose as a leader, but I feel like I'm running around just putting out fires left and right. And I said, well, of course you do. And some part of you loves that, but the other part of you is way behind on what you need to do and focus time for yourself. And you're also fueling these micro codependencies within your team and actually stripping them of the discomfort that you need to feel in order to grow as a professional and a person and get those repetitions in. So it's starting with that validation and really not grabbing that ball of yarn, meeting that person where they're at. And whether that's through just, again, pausing, whether that's through paraphrasing what they said, whether that's through just acknowledging like, no, I can see. Yeah, I can see why your stress is high. And pausing to see where that person then takes it, right? If they have a direct ask, if they want to process it, if you need to jump in then with the second step of kind of that empathy and just, again, acknowledge and move into the inquire step where you are asking questions. And don't get me wrong, this takes a little more patience. This takes a little more time. And some of our questions can be where we kind of are saying, well, what would it look like if you tried this? Let them stew on that, but keep ownership of how they choose to go, like the step they choose next. I think that's the biggest thing. And so we have validate, we have empathize, we have inquire, and then it kind of moves into that strength-based, approach where we motivate. And that's where, again, it's not just like, well, you'll figure it out. Good luck. It's not this kind of gloss over, but this is where leadership and your EQ and even parenting comes into play, where you have taken the time, hopefully, to get to know this person. Kind of some patterns, you've collected a bit of data at what tends to ignite them, when they can show up, when they can fight through maybe some hard things internally that they might be battling. And those are the things that you start to highlight. You start to bring up themes of like, you know what, I remember last year at this time, this was kind of a struggle for the team. And I know that I remember you mentioning this as well. How did you get through that? Or does this relate to any of this, what you're going through now? Those types of questions are building bridges, are highlighting strengths, but still validating that you're going through something hard. And so I think that's, that moves us into the last stage, which again, these aren't all neatly packaged in one conversation, essentially, but that last stage is circling back. This is where the support comes in. This is where, as leaders, as parents, as friends, as partners, we circle back with each other and we say, I've thought about our conversation. Like, how are you doing? Or like, did you end up taking that step? Or, how's it going? I mean, I don't know. I'm sure you've experienced this too, where you've maybe been vulnerable with a friend or someone and really shared, they created space for you. And you get that text or that call or that email a few days later, like, hey, thinking about you. How's it going this week? It's nice. It builds that authentic connection. You see that like they aren't jumping in and like, oh, I had more thoughts and do X, Y, and Z. It's where are you at? Are you okay with where you're at? Do you need me in any way? If not, you got this. It's that trust in you that you got your ball of yarn and you're untangling it.
Yeah. What I love about that, so much in there, Leah, is that authentic connection. Like when you said that, I had chills in my body because I felt that human connection between that person when you get that text from someone I sent one of those texts this week. And you know what that person said, like what it meant to them? Just to know that somebody's thinking about you when you are going through a very difficult time. But the thing I want to pull out that really just kind of became an aha moment to me in this whole framework that you're talking about is I think a lot of us go in with this fix it mentality or this fix it approach because it's almost like, give me a hammer, I'll go fix it. Yes, I'm moving so fast, right? But I could see the value of, in what I do, there's a lot of discussions about, are you a coach? Are you a consultant? And I know a lot of people show up with the blend of that. But the definition of coaching is to ask questions where people can find the answers within themselves versus a consultant to come in from the outside and offer a solution. Would it be appropriate to say that many serial fixers are more consultants than they are coaches? And what would the value be of us getting training on how to ask those questions?
That's a very interesting thought. And I mean, just by the definition of those two things, you're right. I will say, though, that some of, the best consultants, if we just hover on that for a second, that I know do such a good job, though, of the pre-work. They want the whole package before they diagnose, if you will.
Yes.
I think coaches do the same thing and, clinicians as well. But you're right. It's sometimes there's an impatience with, oh, I've seen this before. This is exactly what you need to do. This is the prescription. Here you go. And I think that, that doesn't require quite as much time, but it's not authentic. And we're taking little bits of information. We don't have the whole package yet, and we're solving and we're fixing and we're prescribing. And I think that that's something that we're stripping ownership. We're moving ahead too fast. We're not meeting the situation where it is. And that's where, coaches and clinicians, I think, and not to negate and kind of, downsize or displace consultants, but I think that's part of our mission is I want to be that space creator. I want to hear your story. There may be things that you're pulling out or that you're saying that sound familiar, and my mind is already kind of relating it to other things because that's what the mind does. But you're exactly right. It's kind of asking those questions rather than, oh, well, let's wrap this right up. And this is what you need to do. And this is how you do it. And, if you follow these steps, I won't need to hear from you again. And that's not how it works. We're so complex. We're so fragile. We have one mindset one day where we're like gung ho and we're like, have this whole massive plan for ourselves and we're ready to do it and everything's firing. And then the next day we're like, who was that person yesterday? Like, can I get her back? Because now I'm feeling all the self-doubt and criticism and I'm like reliving like things that happened 2 years ago. And so again, to normalize this, but acknowledge and filtrate through yourself, what are these parts of me not trusting? Can I fact check this? Can I pull from data, resilience, and really go internally with some of these things rather than what we're doing so much of today is running for someone else to structure and fix or distraction or numbing agents to pull away from the work that needs to happen in here.
Yeah, no, so much of that. All right. So you have spoken across industries on many, many different stages. Why do you believe the message of serial fixer is especially urgent right now?
I think, and I hope that, with the feedback I've received, I think it aligns that serial fixer and really this whole notion, it can fit the package with most anyone because it hits the human components of what makes us go. And so it's not just about kind of just leaderships in this realm or in this type of, this part of the professional world. There's such a need for it right now because I think we are all scrambling to find connection. There's a lot of loneliness that is happening, and it's confusing with all the efforts that we're making and where we're putting ourselves and what we're trying to do. And so I do think not only when it comes to burnout and overextension and loneliness and imbalanced relationships and all those things, I want to hit it at this level where it generates self-awareness of how are you showing up to just exchanges, in-depth conversations, and relationships, and really becoming real with the role that you're placing yourself in or that you're keeping yourself in. And is that truly serving you and the people that you love and care about and want to work with the best? And so I really love, and this was one of my main goals, is as much as people say, Leah, find your targeted audience. Who is this for? I challenged that. And I said, you know what? This is for humans. Mm-hmm. This is for college students. This is for empty nesters. This is for, people that have high levels of empathy and compassion, that are putting in so much effort, that are confused, that are feeling lonely, that are fixing, that are solving, that are exhausted. And there's a different way to lead with all those strengths, but keep yourself in the mix.
I love that. The whole thing, like, we are humans. And I know, if I don't get a good night's sleep, I am a different person the next day than the day I was before. But I think the point about all of this is, even if we don't think that we're a serial fixer, which, we may be on a different scale, right? Wherever you are. But think of the value of knowing what this is and being able to recognize the people around you, to be able to support them, to be a hold space for them, to be more compassionate about what they're doing, and not to immediately judge them because they're coming off the way that they feel like they have to do that. So I really, really do appreciate that. Leah, thank you so much for bringing us into this conversation, giving us the language to talk about something that so many of us that we live, but we don't recognize. What's the best way for people to reach you?
Of course. Well, you can always, my email is leah@leahmarone.com. My website is leahmarone.com, and you can find information about Serial Fixer there to pre-order. And I'd love to just continue a conversation. I have a Fixer Files on Substack where people can send in, kind of to me, just ways and examples of like, oof, I think I'm a serial fixer in this way, or I've noticed this way. And just kind of, again, having this conversation and this open forum to normalize and help us improve, again, and be more mindful of how we're showing up for others and how we're showing up for ourselves.
Yes. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for creating this space.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for all of you listeners out there, and if you are a human, then I think this book is for you. I happen to fall into that category too. We know Serial Fixer is more than a book. It's a mirror, it's a manual, and it's a movement. And if you've been feeling burned out, resentful, or like you have to earn your worth by fixing everyone else's problems, this book is your permission slip to step off of that treadmill. I also want to point out, if you need a speaker, Leah would be a great solution for you, because the world needs her voice right now more than ever. So go get your copy of Serial Fixer, break free from the habit of solving other people's problems. I promise it's going to change the way you see yourself, your work, and your relationships. And remember, passion, purpose, and personal brand aren't built on fixing. They're built on showing up authentically. We'll see you here next week.